access. This meeting is being recorded, everyone. I am Meg Beyer. I work at the McSilver Institute, and I'm one of the MCTAC partners. We're going to get started shortly for just a few more people to join us before we get our webinar started today. And just to refresh everyone, this webinar will be on access to adult behavioral health, HCBS, for non-health home enrollees and the state designated entity. So we'll be another minute or two to get this kicked off. Thanks for joining us again. Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you again for joining us for our webinar on access to adult behavioral health, HCBS, for health home enrollees, the state designated entity. My name is Meg Beyer. I am one of the MCTAC partners, and I help to coordinate and run the technical assistance offerings that we offer around New York State. Just a few housekeeping items before we ask to our state presenters who will take us through some of the content for today's webinar. For those of you who have joined us before for our webinars, this is going to be something you've heard before, but for those of you who are first-time joiners, we just want to make sure everyone's familiar with kind of how the process is going to work. So we do have time at the end of today's webinar for question and answer. We would request that you chat in your questions using the chat box, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. And would ask that you select the Submit to All Panelists option when chatting in your questions. Our state partners, as well as ourselves, are all calling in from different locations. So when you chat into all panelists, we're able to see the questions that come in, and we appreciate that. Additionally, we are also going to be posting the recording of this webinar, as well as the resources, the slides, and the updates to our website. So you can check back in about 48 hours, and that information should all be posted to the MCTAC website. And finally, a little plug again to send in questions, and also that the content of this webinar is relevant and current as of today, which is February 22nd, 2018. I know that since we record these webinars, people do tend to listen to them far into the future, and we just want to say that if you're listening to this far into the future, make sure you check the most updated and recent state information and policy. So that, I wanted to again welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. And I would like to invite one of our state partners, Pat Lincourt from OASIS, to come and kind of orient us for the webinar today. Pat?
Thank you, Meg. Pat Lincourt. I am the Director of Practice Innovation and Care Management here at OASIS, and I just wanted to welcome everyone to the webinar, which is going to be led by Nicole Heidi and her team at OMH. But I did want to emphasize that OASAS is also very interested and has been working very closely with OMH as we have developed and rolled out some of this opportunity for state-designated entities to help us to get access for people to home and community-based services. So I'll be here for the webinar, and we'll also be available to take questions as we move forward through the slides. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nicole Haggerty. I'm the director here at OMH for the Bureau of Rehabilitation Services and Care Coordination, and I will be walking through the slides today. Again, we'll be talking about access to adult behavioral health, home and community-based services, or HCBS, for non-health home enrollees, and also known as the state-designated entity. For today, we'll include an overview of HARP. What is HARP and how does it relate to adult behavioral health, HCBS? What is exactly a state-designated entity? Be a contracted assessor agency to assess adult behavioral health, HCBS, and the state-designated entity and access and what that would look like. Started out, and some of you may be familiar, but it's important to note that the Health and Recovery Plan, or HARP, is a kind of managed or Medicaid plan for adults 21 and older. This is designed for people with serious mental health conditions as well as substance use disorders, and covers all benefits provided by Medicaid managed care plans, including clinic, PROS, ACT, SUD clinic, and some more traditional services folks are aware of within the behavioral health system. And in addition, the HARP provides specialty services to help people improve their quality of lives, address goals like going back to work or school, and to be more engaged and part of their community. Medicaid managed care and adult HCBS connection, as I stated, the HARP plans are the only plans to offer the behavioral health, home, and community-based services, and the HARP enrollees will be eligible for those services determined by an eligibility assessment. So first, you are enrolled in a HARP, and you are assessed for eligibility for the services. All of these are eligible for health home care management as well. And health home care managers are given an increased monthly rate to provide enhanced care coordination to HARP enrollees to support their needs and access to the HARP benefit package, including what we're talking about today, access to HCBS. MCOs, which is another word for HARP and for this PowerPoint presentation, managed care organizations, health home care managers, and providers will work together to assist HARP enrollees to access HCBS. MCO has a very important role in terms of ensuring their members get access to HCBS. Each member is assessed using a state-determined eligibility tool, and MCOs also require and ensure that a person-centered plan of care is included, which meets all federal requirements for each HARP enrollee. MCOs delegate the responsibility for assessment and this person-centered care planning to contracted health homes and stream care management agencies. And for all HARP enrollees should occur within 30 to 90 days of enrollment in the HARP. Of behavioral health, HCBS, and the plan of care must be completed at least annually or warranted by changes in the member's needs. Steps for HCBS include that assessment eligibility and a comprehensive person-centered plan of care. So the assessment, as stated in New York, is called the State Eligibility Assessment, And the comprehensive person-centered plan of care has to include all federal requirements. In a health home receive the New York State eligibility assessment and the care planning services through the health home care manager. Who are not enrolled in health home will have their New York State eligibility assessment and plan of care done by a state designated entity contracted with the MCO as the assessor agency for HCBS. So those HARP enrollees that are enrolled in health home, those will access the HCBS benefit package is through the health home care manager, who will assess the individual for HCBS and do a person-centered plan of care to help that individual access those services. For individuals not enrolled in health home, the designated entity will do the work of assessment and care planning. So in this work, and also related to the federal rules, is a concept called conflict-free care management. This requires any HARP member being referred for HCBS to be offered a choice of service providers. The MC has a key role in that they will review the plan of care to ensure a choice of providers was given. And providers, we mean providers of HCBS, the home and community-based services. And free care management firewall we have in New York State includes the fact that an employee who provides or supervises the New York State eligibility assessment piece and care planning services for any HARP enrollee not provide or supervise the HCBS service to that same individual. And the source of the conflict-free care management is agencies who employ both assessors for adult behavioral health HCBS and providers of adult behavioral health HCBS are required to have separate supervisory structures and firewalls in place to ensure conflict-free care management. So as folks that are doing the assessment and care planning, for example, a state designated entity or health home care manager, also offers HCBS, there must be separate supervisory structures in place according to conflict-free expectations. In order to be a state designated entity and ensure that you have the appropriate qualifications, assessors in that state designated entity must be employed as a care manager or care management program supervisor within that designated agency, or employed, associated with, or contracted for work with another program within that agency. For example, a practitioner, a housing care manager, or an outpatient clinician. So in other words, in order to be a state designated entity, you must have an affiliation with the health home, and that most often looks like, and the agency itself has a care management program within it. And that can do this work under state designated entity can go on that care management program itself. That agency may also have a lot of HARP members within their housing program, for example, that they could take the opportunity, if qualified, to assess that individual and move them towards HCBS. Our specific qualifications for the assessor, which include educational, experience, supervision, and training requirements, anyone who would do this work of assessment for HCBS. And that is, we have a link provided here on the DOH website. There have been some challenges moving folks through this process, even those who were enrolled in the health home program. So the state has made some updates to the process in order to accommodate a more smooth transition to HCBS service to the point of assessment. So we moved what was referenced as the full community mental health assessment. There was a health and care management assessment process that paralleled the HCBS process, and so we had the opportunity to expedite that by cutting off several hours of assessment that would be repetitive for the recipient. We also recently, and this is important, the training itself to conduct the New York State eligibility assessment was originally over 12 hours of training for an assessor, but currently the training is down to about 3 hours. Of course, it depends on the individual taking the training, but a majority of the training was cut down, and again, that was part of moving away from that full community mental health assessment and focusing solely on the eligibility piece. Has also worked to resolve issues around payment to the CMA for the eligibility assessment. Initially, there's a roster where the plan would pay the health home and the health home would pay the CMA, and we had some trouble ensuring CMAs were paid. We moved to a direct billing process. We had an issue with e-mending and an edit for some care management agencies trying to bill, and currently those issues have been resolved. So the payment associated with the assessment itself should be live in effect now, where CMAs are able to bill and be paid for this work. Finally, we revised the HCBS workflow, which was originally put out a couple years ago, to accommodate some of the feedback we received from the field about pain points and bottlenecks within the workflow. So we have, moving forward, there is an adult behavioral health plan of care template that will be offered to support a more focused and to focus on integration and person-centered rehab goals, and the state will issue that template especially for new providers such as state-designated entities who may wish to use something different than the health home care management EHR to do this work. So just to outline some of what we're really trying to get at here with the state-designated entity is to ensure that this target group, which is the first bar of 104,000 HARP enrolled individuals, the goal, as stated, is to ensure that all HARP members are assessed for HCBS. And of course, outreach and engagement is a big piece of that. So at this point, there's about 34% of total HARP enrolled individuals who are actually enrolled in the health home. So prior to state designated entity going into effect, really the only way to assess an individual HARP member for HCBS and move them into referral and linkage would be through the health home. So that only 15,000 have been assessed, of course, that are enrolled in health home. Most folks, after they are assessed for HCBS using the New York State eligibility assessment, are found eligible, as we can see. That's about 13,000. And we start to look at how many individuals of those found eligible and assessed actually move forward to moving towards HCBS and including those services in the plan of care. And of course, what you see is that there are less folks that get to that point, and even less that get to a claim. So of course, the focus here is really that we can support the 60% plus individuals who are not enrolled in health home and help them access these services. But about 66% of HARP enrollees are not enrolled in health homes. COs will now contract with eligible entities to provide assessment and care planning for HCBS for HARP enrollees not in health home. And again, thinking back to the graph, that's a good amount of individuals, and there's a lot of opportunity to connect some of those individuals to the services that they have in their benefit package. Agencies that meet the following state-issued criteria are eligible to become SDEs. So this is really an important piece here. Agencies are community-based organizations that are New York State designated health homes or affiliated with a health home and who employ individuals meeting the assessor qualifications, as mentioned earlier. An agency that is considered affiliated with a health home when the agency has a contractual relationship with a New York State designated health home for the provision of health home care management services. So the agency has a health home care management program, or refer to it as agency is a part of the downstream health home care management provider network. Has provided a list of these agencies to MCOs who meet this criteria, so the MCOs can start to begin contracting activities and engaging in conversations with entities that they might be interested in doing this work. Become contracted assessor agency. So MCOs will reach out to agencies on the state-issued list who they'd like to contract with as assessor agencies to do this assessment and care planning for the non-health home enrolled HARP members. MC must contract with a sufficient number of state designated entities to meet the need in each county. So we really want to see that all HARP members, regardless of health home enrollment, are given the opportunity to access these valuable services. MCs can amend existing contracts with MCOs to include state-designated entities. We'll post and maintain an updated list of contracted assessor agencies by county for public reference. We collect this information from the managed care plans. The state will provide a list of those contracted entities that are doing this work for individuals not enrolled in health home. And this note, a designated entity must have a contract as an assessor agency in place with an MCO before it can begin completing assessments and plans of care for individuals not enrolled in a health home. In other words, if you are someone who's interested in becoming a state-designated entity and helping HARP enrollees access HCBS who are not enrolled in health home, in order to do that, you must have a contract with the plan first for work. It's not something that you can start without that process. Okay, for individuals or providers that are in the community and are not necessarily state-designated entities themselves, it's important to note that these entities will allow you to refer individuals directly to the assessment and care planning for HCBS for those not enrolled in health home. And so, in other words, a lot of, we hear, for example, some clinicians saying that the individual HARP enrollees they're working with, despite some education efforts, are not at the time interested in health home, but are, however, interested in accessing HCBS. So in this case, you work by contracting the member's MCO. MCO will provide members and their providers the names of these contracted assessor agencies and can advise you how to connect with these assessors to support your HARP enrollee. You also have a list of state-designated entities they're contracted with that they may be able to share upon request. So as the assessor begins any work with the HARP member, the assessor must contact the MCO to confirm the individual is not already being served by a health home or another assessor agency. So the importance of that is there may be several different state-designated entities out there contracted even in your county. That entity will need to work with the plan when they receive a referral to ensure that that individual is not already being served by a health home or not already assigned to another state-designated entity. So start as a provider to start with the plan and communicating with the plan if you are serving a HARP enrollee who's interested in accessing HCBS is the best first step. The state-designated entity guidance has been issued, went out on several listservs that will be posted on these OMH, possibly OASIS as well websites, so that folks will have access to the full scope of procedures and policies, expectations for the state-designated entity. Just to note, today's webinar is really, the purpose is to focus on sort of the broad overview of the guidance document and not to dive too deep into the document itself today, but just to make folks aware that this is something that's happening with more information coming soon. Okay. And, I think it's important to note that there are several other initiatives surrounding HCBS and the state wanting to support the ramp up of those services. If you can remember back to the slide I showed you with the visual, we have definitely had some challenges having folks move through the workflow. Again, the federal requirements are such that individuals cannot just be immediately linked. We are used to within the system via a direct referral or even a walk-in, but these HARP members must, go through an assessment and very specific care planning process. And so, in order to support the barriers that exist both within Health Home as well as for the HARP members that have not yet enrolled in Health Home, there will be a new initiative around HCBS stimulus, where funding will be available through managed care organizations to increase HCBS service provision. Providers will be given the opportunity to submit proposals to MCOs to receive these stimulus funds. And the vision is really that the stimulus will provide financial supports to providers for innovation and rapid access of eligible HARP individuals to receive HCBS. And so the state's goal remains to extend rehabilitation services for the HARP population, increase the provision of HCBS, and provide funds for innovative solutions to engagement, access, and utilization. And so we want to make sure that we note that these initiatives are related in that the state-designated entity, as well as Health Home care managers, HCBS providers as well, will all be a part of this effort to help individuals access these services. The HCBS stimulus funding categories, including what we call access and linkage infrastructure, will support provider proposals initiatives including workforce development and education, HCBS infrastructure specifically for capacity building and member engagement, peer support and development, respite services development, and workforce development. So what you're seeing on this slide, again, are some examples of provider proposal topics or strategies that will support the overall goal of the state to increase access to the provision of HCBS. Okay, wraps up the slide portion, and I would just invite anyone here in my or over the phone at Oasis or state partners would like to add anything before we get into questions.
Okay. All right, well, this is Meg at McSilver McTack. So not hearing anything else from state partners at this point. If it's cool, we might dive into the questions that have been chatted in, because we have quite a few of them. So just as a reminder, because this did come up on the questions, we will be posting this recording and the slides to our website within 48 hours. It just our system just a little bit of time to download the recording. So back Monday for the final recording slides. And I think Boris is going to take us through some more of the questions.
Yes, and so thank you again, everybody, for the presentation, and keep those questions coming through the chat box. If we're not able to get to your questions today, we're definitely will be working with the state, and hopefully can get some of the Q&A out there as well. So in no particular order, we'll just start with some of the questions that came in. Your first question is, will HARP members that have eligibility assessment and POC completed by a state-designated entity be required to have an annual assessment POC as well?
That's a good question, and the answer is yes. All HARP members are required to have annual HCBS eligibility assessments. So that state designated entity would not just be doing assessments, but they would also be responsible for planning, person-centered care planning, which involves, addressing the changing needs over time, and that includes reassessment if needed, as well as changes to the plan of care.
Thank you. Next question. Please advise if SEDs will bill state directly for assessments, POC development, or if they will bill contracted plans.
Entities will have contractual relationships with the MCO so that they will bill the plan directly. For the plan of care, and there's very specific rates listed within the guidance that that shows exactly what rates can be billed.
Got it. Just because there is a related question, I guess, again, about the CMAs continuing to bill directly to the state versus the plans, right? Just to be very clear that there's, is that correct? Regular health home.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Boris. Go ahead, Stacy. Stacy understood the question.
Yeah, this is Stacy. I'm assuming that the question is, if a CMA becomes an SDE and will be doing SDE work, how would they plan? Would they still go through eMedNI like the health home CMA may be? The answer is no. It would be similar to what Nicole was saying for SDE. There will be a contract with the managed care organization, and they would bill through that plan.
Right. So for their usual health home piece, they will bill directly to the state, and as SDE, they will bill to the plan.
Let me just be clear that would only be for the assessment, because the plan of care rate that is included in the state designated entity guidance is not used home care managers, because care planning is built in the per member per month home service rate. So the difference would be, I think what we're talking about is the assessment rate, but it's important to note that the rates within the guidance include a plan of care rate, which the health home care manager would not bill for.
Correct. Oh, all right. Thank you for clarifying. So we have a number of questions about the list that was provided to managed care organization and the timing of the list being available, as you mentioned. So one number of questions, just confirming that all downstream case management agencies were included on those lists to the managed care organization, and a follow-up to that is that list already available for public viewing, or if not, when will it be available?
The list does include all current downstream health home care management agencies, and that list was provided to the managed care organizations. We will likely not use that list for public viewing, but rather once plans are contracted with entities, we will make that list public so that everyone is aware who is actually contracted to do this work. We don't want to confuse between the full list of eligible entities and those that are actually doing this work, so that when individuals are either making referrals to those entities or providers want to know, who are serving HARP members in this way, we have a clear, definitive list for that posted on the state website.
Good, thank you. Next question. Just think here. So the agency is becoming the SDE. Do they need to wait for the plan to contact them to start contracting? Can they, an eligible organization can reach out to plans?
Pilot from OMH. Even from the beginning of the transition, we have always encouraged providers to reach out to managed care organizations. They, have a service or something that they want to discuss negotiating a contract with an MCO. So at this point, there should be no one that's holding back if they want to do this work and they know which managed care organizations they want to work with. I think feel free to pick up the phone and call your network, your provider network contact, and start that dialogue.
Thank you, Charlotte. A couple of questions about contracts and just confirmation again. So here, one, there was a question in regards to, will there be any contract templates if the state will be providing in regards for the SDE and the managed care company in regards to contracting? Also, just confirming that means that the managed care company will be contracting directly with the SDE and not through the health home for the SDE services. So a couple of contracting questions.
Yeah, so there won't be any contract template that's going to be released from the state. You know, MCs are well versed in you know, making sure that contracts are what they need to be to start this process. Clearly, you know, the state is always here if there are contract issues that arise during the contracting period. You know, what was your question there?
The health home.
Oh, it's a direct contract with the provider doing the actual assessment and plan of care, which we're calling the state designated entity, not through the health home.
So in other words, were you going to mention? Go ahead. Go ahead.
This is Doug. I was just also going to mention, when we say SDE, we mean an agency which may have many lines of business other than their downstream care management agency. And I'm hopeful that with this ability to do assessments via SDE process, they may be able to identify if you have housing programs or clinic programs or programs. Staff that are qualified to do assessments that may have a more familiar and trusting relationship with HARP members and be more successful in working with them to complete an assessment and get access to HCBS services. So we don't envision this primarily being the same care management staff that are employed in the health home to have a different business card and say, oh, you don't want to work with the health home? Well, I'm also an SDE. We're really imagining that these are people that are participating in some of your other programs.
That's correct. And the contract, just to close that loop, Boris, for that question, would be with the agency who are providing services, or the agency who employs the assessor, and that would be the direct contract with that agency, not the health home.
Thank you.
In some cases, I just want to say one last thing about the contracting.
Please.
In some cases, the agency is going to be clearly already contracted with the MCO, and just adding a service line to be able to bill for these two rate codes and for these two services. So it may not be that you're starting from scratch with a brand new contract. It may be that you already have a contract and need to add a service line. I'm sure there's providers probably in both buckets.
Yeah. Well, thank you. The question is just confirming and clarifying in regards to, you know, they also talked a little bit about, you know, other, and during the presentation, others within the agency, not necessarily the case managers doing these. Could that staff be subcontracted staff? You know, so the agency subcontracts, an agency that qualifies, contracts with folks to do these assessments or, you know, the SDE work.
Well, the things you need to be able to contract as an SDE are very clearly outlined in the guidance.
Yeah.
So that is what we need to you know, go at this point.
And you can even try to go back to the specific slide, but then I think what's most important is, as Doug said, vision, which is that we really hope that, because 66% of HARP enrollees are not enrolled in health home, but we know they are in your housing programs, they're in your clinics, they are in other places, and maybe they just haven't got to the point that they're interested in enrolling into the health home, that you have qualified staff who can assess a member and link them to HCBS. So it's really the hope that those staff at different points at members' life, or the individuals that they have a working relationship with, are talking to the member about their benefit, these new services, how they can help them to, get a job, have a meaningful life, be a part of their community. That's what these rehab services are about, and that those individuals may be best suited to have that conversation and move them towards access to these services.
It just also gives us an opportunity to really let plans and providers work together to come up with some innovative strategies to assess and get access to these services that could potentially be very helpful. These are services that could be used in alternative to treatment services that the person may not have been able to engage in successfully. So I think that this is a tool in our toolbox to really approach the assessment and access in a very different way. Given that we have so many people that are not in a health home, and that this is the one of the main tools we're going to be able to use to really assist people in getting through the assessment and referral process.
Thank you. A couple of questions in regards to referrals to SDE, and also, there was a question if the conflict-free applies in that scenario as well. And there's a request if you can repeat or talk a little bit about, again, how do somebody get to SDE?
Okay, well, let me just see if I can align it with this slide here too. I think so.
As far as referral goes, I think that it can happen a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
MCO is going to have a broad purview as to who and their membership has not been assessed and is HARP enrolled or HARP eligible through an HIV SNP. And they're looking at that list and thinking about how do we get these folks assisted and offered services. So a referral can come directly from an MCO to this designated entity to assess someone who may be in their agency somewhere. I think this is, sort of the vision that we have, is that this allows the managed care organization to refer directly for assessment potential referrals to services.
Yep. So it's important to remember, because I think people use conflict-free in many different ways. It's important to remember that, the conflict-free care management, the requirement that is really truly sort of the federal expectation that surrounds the provision of HCBS services is really around the individual assessing that HARP enrollee if they're a part of an agency that also offers HCBS, that they simply offering the individual a choice as to which HCBS provider they would like to receive their services. So I'm the assessor agency, and I say you can receive HCBS here, or there's 3 other agencies nearby that also offer the same service. I make sure that I'm offering you choice as the assessor. That's a part of my person-centered planning job, and I'm documenting that choice was given. Actually, in the plan of care, which we don't get really into today, but in the plan of care, there's actually a checkbox that says, I've been given choice, and of course that member, based on person-centered planning requirements, has to sign that plan of care. And a next step in that is that the managed care organization ensures the member was given choice. So that's really where choice is such a critical aspect. It's really about from the person being assessed to the referral for HCBS.
Got it. So a number of questions came in just to clarify when the term assessor and SDE used, that's kind of interchangeable. Just a number of questions, just wanting to confirm that.
Yeah, understandably so. So I'm going to try to explain it in this way without coining a new term or developing a new acronym, which is what we are honestly trying to avoid here. So there was a list, eligible agencies went out to the managed care plans that said, you meet the requirement which is that you have this affiliation with a health home management program. And so we set eligible lists out to the managed care organizations. Now, once you are actually doing this work and you are contracted with a managed care organization, you are now a designated entity. And so when I say assessor agency, that's more we're trying to talk about the role that you're in and the work that you're doing. And we're trying to figure out the best way to not confuse people from the list of eligible entities to do this work versus those that are actually doing the work, which, again, part of how we're going to help everyone decipher those two things is that we are going to provide a report on only the entities contracted with managed care plans that are actively doing this work, because, of course, not all eligible agencies will be doing this.
Thank you for clarifying that. So we had a number of questions on that. We also got a number of questions on kind of what's the role of a SDE agency post-assessment and POC. Is there any particular other expectations besides completing those two, tasks?
So it's a great question. And the guidance itself probably spells it out best. But I think it's important to know that the state-designated entity is not doing comprehensive care management like health home care management care manager would, or else that person should be enrolled in the health home program, right? Which, again, is a goal that we believe many HARP members all are eligible, and that many, if not all, could benefit from comprehensive care coordination. So the work the state-designated entity is doing is different than that. There's a very focused effort solely on the access and linkage to HCBS, so that there's a much later requirement on what is involved from a care management perspective, only around the plan of care. And so the rates, when you see the rates, and I can actually show it, this is what that work looks like. Hang on. Okay. There we go. Oh, like the document here. Here we are. Okay, so the rates, and so work attached with the state-designated entity is the assessment itself, which has its own distinct rate, the plan of care development, it includes the full plan of care with all federal requirements. So that means that you've made linkage to the HCBS, you have the information to which HCBS provider is working with that individual, etc. There's some person-centered planning questions in there that would all be included in this plan of care rates. Plan care ongoing, work that we know may be done when somebody either adds a service or maybe removes a service or something in their life changes that you need to look at the plan of care again. So we have this rate called plan of care development ongoing, which is billed per 15-minute increments. And that rate allows for the ongoing plan of care development over time until that individual is reassessed and a new plan of care is looked at annually.
Thank you. That answers a couple of questions that we got as well in regards to, will the SDEs be paid for kind of ongoing, plan of care development, and you just answered that, so great, thank you for that. We have a number of variations of questions and, I guess, concerns about making sure that, SDEs know who's eligible, making sure the individual is not enrolled in the health home or in the process of being enrolled in the health home, and the best way to kind of, MAP versus eMedNI, managed care, kind of to determine, and I guess I can see concerns, that maybe an SDE, does this, but at the same time the person is being enrolled in the health home and coordinating that. So any thoughts, suggestions? I mean, I'll just put my sense, of course, you should be talking to the managed care organization that should have that information, because maybe MAP doesn't have everything up to date. But just want to hear from you guys, because we got a number of kind of similar questions.
I I really think that we're entering the era where managed care and providers have to really be in lockstep. And I think calling the plan is a good place to start. If the referral didn't actually come from the plan, they may call you before you call them. I think that's the beauty of the flexibility that we have with the SDE. I would also say that if your experience is that you call the MCO and you're trying to get some basic information and you're on hold for 10 or 15 minutes to get that information, that we have a managed care mailbox, and we would really like to hear about that because I don't think that is a decision that we're trying to set up for anyone. So please, I think systems are working well, and there is quick access to the MCO. Like I said, if they're not calling you first, then I think that it would be a pretty straightforward phone call. But please call us or email us if you find you're sitting on the phone just waiting for some basic information, because that would be something we would definitely want to know about and help to improve.
And this might well be something you discussed at the time that you subcontract to provide this service. Is how are we going to communicate in both directions? Is it going to be a special phone number or a special person that we should be communicating with? Do we need to provide, as an assessor agency, a person who you should be calling? You want to refer somebody to us in order for us to go out there and try to reach one of your members.
So if I can just summarize that, because this is a really critical point. We've had a lot of questions come through the listservs already about this. What you're saying is that plans and providers need to work together, especially around someone's services within their benefit package. So as Doug illustrates, if you're a state-designated entity, you're going to enter in a contract with the plan. You need to establish processes and protocols that work for you. If you are not an assessor agency, but you're a provider serving a HARP enrollee, and you're wondering how to connect that individual to one of these state-designated entities, we point you back to the managed care organization, because that managed care organization is going to help, wants to help that individual access their benefit package, so they're going to point you to the right entity to do this work.
Okay, well, thank you. Next question, we have maybe another question or two because we're coming close to the 4 o'clock hour. One question came through in regards to one of those what happens questions. So you do the assessment at the SDE, maybe develop a POC, and later on the individual wants to join a health home and enroll in a health home. Is there any rules or guidance on, is there supposed to be some sort of a time frame between this happens and somebody enrolling in a health home? Can somebody just enroll the following day, if you will? Any kind of guidance on there?
Yeah. So again, the plan will need to ensure that the entities who are doing this state-designated entity work for HCBS are not enrolled in the health home. And that's how that entity can be paid, because the individual is not enrolled in a health home, so they're doing this work with that entity. At the point at which someone enrolls in a health home, and we hope that happens, that would be a great end result, especially because, again, this work is not care management. State-designated entity work is just about the provision of care of HCBS services, the access to and the plan of care that is required attached to it. So if an individual ends up saying, you know what, I could really use that care management support and I want to be enrolled in a care management, the idea of having that agency affiliated health home care management program is that there is direct access to that care manager, and that the individual could be what we often refer to as upward enrolled in the health home at the point that that individual expresses interest in being enrolled.
I think the goal really is to get the individual into comprehensive care management. The goal is not for one to compete with the other. It's, part of the reason that we have linked the state-designated entity with for agency that has a care management agency arm associated with it is ultimately, most of these folks could comprehensive care management to assist them in a lot of the social determinant issues that they're facing, and just coordinating and navigating the healthcare system overall. So there's no competing agenda here. It's really to work together with the ultimate goal to get the individual the most quality, coordinated, comprehensive care possible.
And there's care company managing this process, and they'll be looking at data. So I think that one of the parts of this question, at least to me, implies that somebody is doing an assessment and a plan of care one day from Assessor agency, and then the next day they say, I want to be in a health home. And then the health home would do some type of an assessment and plan, do what they do. And I think that certainly will happen. But if it happens in an unusual number of times, that adheres to a plan that a particular agency might be trying to get paid for an assessment twice, one by the, by the assessor agency, and next day by the health home care manager that is employed by the same agency, they'll probably, that'll hit their radar and probably have a conversation with that provider. We don't imagine that that's going to happen fluently, but people may very well, once they get an assessment of plan of care, hear about the benefits of care management and say, hey, I want that. We're hoping, as I said, we're hoping that that's what will happen.
Excellent. Thank you. And so the last question, as we have a minute left, any sense on when the template for the plan of care will be available?
Okay, so let me just say this. There is already a template, an HCBS plan of care template on the DOH website currently. It's, if you search HARP and HCBS, you will get right to that. What the reference I made today is that we're issuing a more sort of intuitive, recovery-focused plan of care that's also, we imagine, being helpful to the state-designated entity who would be primarily focused on CBS. And so we anticipate in the next week or so, all fingers crossed, and that we have that up on the website and the DOH website in place of what's currently offered, as well as something we can send out on some of our provider managed care listservs.
Excellent. Well, it's 4 o'clock. We have a number of other questions that we got around, SDE and even in stimulus as well money. We even got a question about the Olympics and who we think will win in a mixed doubles curling team. So we might need to ponder on that one as well. So that's an important question.
I just want to make one announcement before we fully close, is that
please.
We will be doing, New York State's going to be going out with the interagency team the end of March to talk about state-designated entities, contracting with managed care organizations for the uptake of these services, the behavioral health HCBS stimulus funds, and how that's envisioned, and how providers and MCOs are going to work together for some infrastructure dollars and quality incentive. So I just want to put that out there so that people will be looking out for that. We're going to do a Rochester, Albany, New York City, and Long Island site, and those notices will be coming out through NICTEC, next week or two.
All right. Thank you. And again, thank you, everybody, and thank you, everybody, for joining and our presenters. Today, as Meg mentioned, we'll be posting these, both the recording and the slides. And we hope to see you in person around the roadshow. All right. Thank you, everybody, and take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.